Welcome back to the channel. Today on the bench we have this Kronotron Electra, made in Hong Kong. This is a friend of mine's watch he brought to me to service for his brother. This one's for you, Randy. So you sit back and watch, and you'll get to see all the cool stuff I got to do to your watch. And first thing we're going to do is open it up and check out what we got inside. Alright. That is definitely a mechanical watch. This is a 1-jewel watch. That's what it says on the back of it. Here we got this old gasket coming out, and I'm going to take this gasket out and replace it with new fresh gasket, nice and siliconed. This is a Perinin 2641 movement. It's a pin lever escapement, and it's labeled as 1 jewel, but we will do a jewel count throughout this service. So there's the first jewel there, that capstone. So here I'm just going to let the wind out of the watch, and that's so I can disassemble it without all the parts flying everywhere. This is a little bit of a weird design here to pull this crown out, but we got it. Looks like there's some plastic pieces inside of this. Now check out this crystal. I hadn't seen a crystal like this before. It's not just the oval, it's the whole circle. There, as I pulled it up, it brought some of the paint with it. So when I clean that later, I'll be careful to not take that paint off, so it'll look like it's still there. We are using my nice high polish hand removal tools so I can not do any damage to the case or the dial. Here's the case. It's pretty dirty. I'll run it through the ultrasonic cleaner. That'll clean it right up. Here's that plastic I was talking about. It's interesting. Okay, so how do we get this dial off of there? There's some more plastic. Okay, so I found it. Here's how you get the dial out. It's kind of these little like cantilevers, or I don't know, it's almost like a spring tension. It's not a screw that I'm used to. So you got to pry these off of these dial feet, and then you can pull the dial off. And that little ring there was the dial spacer. You know, we're used to like the spacers above the hand and pinion there. So these are some pretty tiny screws here. We'll go ahead and get these out. I believe that was the 0.6 millimeter screwdriver. We'll take this date function out. Check it out. It's a weird design. They got 2 plates here. One that holds down the spring, and the other one that holds down the calendar wheel and hour wheel. There's our second jewel. So there's 2 jewels in this movement, even though it's labeled as 1. We already let the wind out, so we can take the ratchet wheel off without anything exploding. So here you'll notice that the balance cock and the pallet fork bridge use the same screws to hold them down. Going back together, I thought this was going to be a problem, but as you'll see later in the video, it's not very difficult to get back together. But they did come out as 1 unit. Oh, there's a 3rd jewel. So we have 3 jewels in this movement. So here you'll see these pins on the pallet fork. Now we're used to seeing jewels there. So this is what they call like a pin lever escapement. And yeah, I mean, some old like vintage Timexes are like that. I have some on my channel where I've worked on. Usually cheaper movements that have that. The jewel counts, the higher the jewel count, usually the more quality, up to a certain point. Back in the day, I mean, earlier before this watch is probably about, you know, somewhere in the 70s. But before then, they did have like a jewel race, which is funny. But jewels meant quality to the public, so the higher number of jewels it stated it had, the higher quality people thought the movement was. This spring, this crown spring, this click spring, this thing here is stuck on there with oil. There's a ton of oil underneath the bridge. You saw me checking for play there on the barrel arbor. Looked good. No play there. Unlike what we find later on in the video. But here we go. I thought these were plastic at first, but they are not. They're just like a black steel. It's very weird. So I'm pretty sure this doesn't come apart. I tried, and I tried so hard I didn't want to break it, so I figured, it felt like it had enough spring power, so I just left it off to the side while I washed everything else. And, after, maybe I could have replaced that, but it turned out okay. This is one dip here, and you want to use that on anything that has shellac holding jewels in. Here we are going and putting the barrel back in. And this is 9501, the blue grease going here on this clutch system. Putting the barrel bridge back on. And this movement assemble's relatively easy. It's got these little pivots or datums that go into the screw holes. It's honestly great. I was surprised at how easy this was to assemble for, what it is. Here we are putting the click spring back on. This allows you to rotate the crown, the ratchet mechanism, and then it keeps it from unwinding through the ratchet wheel. And then it has to unwind through the gear train. Oh, that's all right. It's still in there. I can move it back. It's got this little hole, this secondary hole that's a pin for the alignment. Let's hold it in place this time when I tighten it down. We'll just put the other screw in here where the balance bridge is at. I'm liking these new angles. I feel like the videos are getting better. I could probably still work on the quality of my videos and the quality of my work, but here I am just testing to make sure everything works. Push it in, yep, okay, so that's working. This here is 8200. Actually, sorry, that's 1300. Yeah, the 1300 is the thicker, but not the thickest. So that's on slow, high friction, slow moving. It's the escape wheel going in. This is the center wheel going in. The third wheel here going in. And all these wheels are gear reduction. They mesh together and reduce it by fractions to, the power reserve all the way down to seconds or beats per hour. However the engineers designed it. That's the fourth wheel going in. Very cool concept. Missing, could have had a little bit of a better camera angle there. I try to leave some of this stuff, like live. I don't like to edit a lot of this stuff, so you can see some of it's a struggle. Some of it's not. I was honestly surprised at how well this main bridge dropped on. Here you can see these little black areas around the pivots. So normally there's jewels in these locations. These aren't even bushings, they're just holes in the plate. So I end up having to repair these later on in the video. They're egg shaped, so basically what happened was this watch was ran without oil, hadn't been serviced in a long time. And as it ran, it those pivots ground the holes oblong, and I did punch them and file them back into where they're tighter, but they're not perfect. Probably the best way to do it would be to drill them out and replace them with a jewel or a bushing and broach cut it. This causes a lot of issues: amplitude, beat error. You know, the timing's off. This watch doesn't get time graphed very easily either because it's a pin lever escapement. So the time grapher readings were inconsistent. So I ended up just getting it the best I could with the time grapher and going through and just wearing the watch for a few days on each wrist and setting it in weird positions and just letting it run for hours to see. And it's running pretty good, actually. It's running a lot better than the time grapher suggests it does. The lift angle on this is a 42 degree. It's 18,000 beats per hour. This is the ratchet wheel going back in. You can see it says Hong Kong Remix. These are a little tricky sometimes to line up the square. It's not difficult, but sometimes they just don't want to fall into place. Because you got to line the gears and the square up. Sometimes you have to rotate the crown wheel. The crown wheel on this movement, if you noticed, is riveted on. There is no way to take the crown wheel off. Here I am testing it, so everything's moving. That's good. Here we go with this pin pallet. Man, this thing was pretty difficult to get in there. It did not want to go. I ended up having to hold it up at an angle and use an oiler to move it back and forth to get it in. And this looks big on your screen, but I promise you this thing is microscopic. This is tiny. This is on my highest magnification under my microscope. That oiler is about the size of a sewing needle. You can't even see those pins with your bare eyes that are on that. I oiled these cap jewels on the balance through the backside of them. There wasn't any way to take them out besides pushing them out. And even then I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get them apart. So I made sure they were clean on the inside through the watch cleaning machine and whatnot, and one dip. And then let them dry. And then I just took some 9010 and poked it down in there with my smallest oiler. Here you can see what I'm saying with this bridge here for the pallet fork, using the same screw holes as the balance itself. And once I get this on here, we're going to put some wind in here, hold it down so it doesn't come out. And we want to check and see if this power is coming through the mainspring all the way down through the gear train into this pallet fork. And to test for that, we're just going to flick it. And as you touch it, it should move pretty quickly across to the other pin. Yeah, I forgot to put the footage in here of me putting the balance in. There might be some later on in the video because I take it back out. This is 9010 going on the exit pallet pin. Here you can see it's just shaking back and forth there. That's just one example. Almost all of the pivots in this movement are doing that. Here's me punching this. This is the main bridge. I took it back off, and I am punching all of the pivot holes to collapse them on themselves to make them tighter. And then I'm checking it with my microscope to see how much I've moved them in, being very careful not to move them too much. And then here I'm taking what's known as a broaching tool or cutting tool, and just making sure I get them to where the pivots can go back through the holes, because you don't want them too tight, and they do end up being too tight, and I have to take them back off and redo it. And you know, this is a process. This is just some of it that I show you here, and this is me flattening them back out. We're going back on, and we're going to test it out after this. Now, that is not the best practice, but that is the easiest and cheapest way to do this, especially on a movement that we cannot find. I mean, there are some on eBay for way more than what we want to pay for it. This is 90-10 going on all the pivot holes, and each one of those that I'm oiling, almost all of these, had to be punched tighter and then recut slightly. Like I said, the correct way and best way to do that would probably be drill those holes out all the way, put a new bushing in there, and then cut it to the size you need. I cannot get this watch to regulate. You're seeing me mess, you know, with the roller table there to try to adjust the beat error, and then the speed regulator. And I'm like, what is going on with this spring? You'll see there's a bend in it, and it's out of flat. So here's a picture of it out of flat. You can see it's kind of like a bowl shape. Here's the time grapher I was getting. The time grapher, it doesn't really matter because I never got consistent results out of it. I just don't think my time grapher was reading this very good. So there I am trying to correct this hairspring bend. You know, the coils need to be even. The spacing is supposed to be even. So I try to get that as best as possible. And also you can't take this hairspring out because it's epoxied in. It's a factory epoxy, I think. But I didn't want to deal with trying to re-epoxy it, so you know, it wasn't that damaged, so I just tried to tweak it while it was on there still. So after service and regulation, this watch was like plus or minus 90 seconds a day. It seems to run better than that after the last 3 days or so wearing it around. It had like a 300 amplitude, which is awesome, especially for not taking the mainspring out. And the beat error is way high. The beat error shows, and I had the lift angle set right, and the beats per hour, and the beat error was like 9 milliseconds or something crazy. And then in certain angles it would go to 30. But I've not seen any issue with leaving the watch at an angle and letting it run for hours in that position and it being off time. So I think that maybe my time grapher just can't read this type of escapement very good. So this is the spring that holds the calendar wheel in place that allows it to spring click to the next day when you rotate the function over. Nothing's really holding this wheel in here, you know. So we got this spring set in there, and then this next plate that comes in kind of holds the wheel in, yeah, through the teeth on the side of it. Honestly, this movement was relatively fun to work on. It didn't give me too much trouble. Didn't give me too much trouble as far as a reassembly. I took it apart and put it back together several times. And these are the tiniest screws in the world. Those tweezers will like poke you. They're so sharp. And they're like the size, they're smaller than the tweezers. It's crazy. Here's that very abnormal dial spacer. It works though. It's not what we're used to seeing. I didn't touch this dial. I didn't clean it. I didn't do nothing to it. I just left it like I was. Didn't want to risk taking more paint off of it. As you've seen, the crystal had already worn paint off of it anyway. Here I am pushing these cams back in to hold the dial in place. go ahead and get the hours hand on. And since this has a date function, we have to put this at the midnight. So as soon as it flicks to midnight, I stop rotating it and put the hour hand on. And then I do a full rotation, 24 hours, all the way back to midnight. And then once I get back to midnight, the date flicks over and we stop. And then we can put the minute hand on directly at midnight. And that ensures that at midnight each day, the date will jump. Or as close to midnight as possible, the date will jump. And here you can see it's almost perfect. At midnight, the date jumps. So we're going to put some wind in this watch. Here we go. It's running. And this is the seconds hand going on. And I typically don't use hand press tools to put the seconds hand on. I just use my tweezers. It's been the best way to do it right there. Is just kind of put it at an angle. Pick it up over the center. So this is just alcohol I'm using to clean the crevices and cracks of this crystal. And I didn't really want to go too hard on the crystal because I didn't want to take the paint off that was stuck to it. That way it looks like the paint's still there on the dial. This is a very weird way to hold the crown stem in, but yeah, it works. Movement holder. I replaced all the gaskets on the crown and the back. This is a solution called what is that called? Polywatch, sorry. And that's just like a wet polish. I went through and polished this with my Dremel as well, with a dry polish, and then redid it with that. Yeah, so let me know what you guys think about this. If you like it, like the repairs I did, think they're bad, either way, check out some of my other videos. Stay tuned. There'll definitely be more videos coming. Thank you.